The top two teams in the AFC West are going to battle on Sunday. The Los Angeles Chargers will welcome the Kansas City Chiefs into town, and we got to break it all down for you today on this crossover episode.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into this crossover episode of the Locked On Podcast Network. I am your host, David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, joined by the host of the Locked On Chiefs podcast, Chris Clark, and we're going to go over the biggest storylines of each of these teams on offense, on defense, and then we're going to get into some of the key matchups that will decide this football game on Sunday. But before we get into this, Crossover Thursday is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, you guys are the away teams, Chris, so we are going to go ahead and kick things off with the Kansas City Chiefs. So going into this game, the Chiefs are 3-0. Everything's on track, just like the two-time defending Super Bowl champions would like it. So what would you say is the biggest storyline for this, this game for the Kansas City Chiefs starting on offense?
Starting on offense, it's the question of what is this offense doing? I think that's the big question. You look at it and they're 3-0, but it has not been easy. Every single game it comes down to a late issue in the fourth quarter, and definitely not something you want to be dealing with as you're trying to go for your third straight Super Bowl win. I can't tell you what's going on with the offense other than I think Mahomes his mechanics look a little bit off. I don't think he's obviously not looking as crisp as he normally has in the past. And maybe even going back to last year, didn't look great, during the year. Then you get into the playoffs and it's a whole different ball game. So, I think he'll get it figured out. I think this team is going to get figured out. The other big storyline, and this is still sticking on the offensive side of the ball, is, what is going on with Travis Kelce. And you look at this game, and I'm not going to say that he's going to have a huge game because I thought he would have a good game the past couple of weeks, and he hasn't. But one of the big storylines from the Chargers' perspective is no Derwin James. And Derwin James versus Travis Kelce has been a huge matchup.
Yeah.
And to not have that this time around, I do think that Travis Kelce could be a little bit more involved because while you can double Kelce, and that's what most teams have been doing to this point, Derwin James has made it to where you didn't necessarily have to double Kelce. And I don't know, you tell me, but I don't think the Chargers really have two guys that are going to be able to stay with him the same way that Derwin James would be able to.
Well, hey, there's not a lot of Derwin Jameses out there, right?
Right.
Derwin James is one of the top defensive players in the National Football League. And what is even more a shame for Derwin specifically is he's coming off of one of his best games of the entire year against the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was flying around, big hits, probably one a little bit too big. Obviously, that led to the suspension. I'm not a big fan of that suspension. I think that was a little bit ticky-tack, especially when we're talking about the first offense of the season. I feel like it should have been a hefty fine. That would, I think, have made more sense to me. But I think this is the NFL trying to throw the book at a superstar who, really trying to make get their point across, say, hey, we want to try to protect players. We're all about player safety. We gotta crack down on this and make sure that, it's something that we are at, it's always going to be at the forefront of our minds. But as far as the Travis Kelce matchup is concerned, there's not a lot of guys that can cover Travis Kelce one-on-one all game long. He's a
Right.
special athlete, special tight end. He has been for a very, very long time. But it seems to me like, is he not in the most, game ready shape at the moment? Do you think that, some of the things that have been going on in the off season with all of his kind of traveling around has had any impact on the beginning of his season so far?
I don't think it's had a ton of impact on the season so far. I'm not going to say it hasn't had any because it would be pretty much impossible for it to not have any. The one thing I will say is I don't think it's really – I know people are questioning whether or not he's in shape. And, I mean, you can question it all you want, but they had something like 70 plays against Atlanta.
Yeah.
And there aren't many football players that are going to be able to play 70 plays at 100% effort
Yeah, that's fair.
this early in the season. I mean, yeah, you get into November and December that, football players are in that type of condition. It's just football shape. I mean, that's part of it. And you don't really get into that until you're playing in a game and you're giving max effort every play. So I'm not going to fault him for maybe looking a little bit tired against the Falcons. He did play, I think, close to 90% of the snaps against the Falcons. So he was still extremely busy. He's taking coverages. I went back and I watched some of the film, and especially on the first drive, you see him, pass blocking a couple times. Obviously there were a couple runs in there where he's run blocking. He's taking, double teams. Sometimes I'm not going to say he was triple team, but he had 3 people within, a 10-yard radius of him. So, he's sitting in one of those zones where they're really, focused on him. So I do think that there are some situations where he has been getting a lot of extra attention. And I do think that that's something that will change over the course of the season, because if you look at what's going on with Kansas City right now, if you want to stop their offense, you got to stop Rashee Rice. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to say nobody has, but they haven't really had a great plan for it so far this season.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So I think that adequately covers things on the offensive side. So let's switch things over to Steve Spagnuolo's defense. And so through 3 games and going into this game here, what would you think is the biggest storyline for the defense for the Chiefs?
There's 2 things for me. One is they're not getting enough pass rush. They're just not getting after the quarterback near as much as that I think that they should be doing. Chris Jones, I don't think had any pressures against the Atlanta Falcons, and he's going up against 2 Falcon linemen that got replaced. There were replacements for some of their offensive line during the game. That is not a Chris Jones type game. And going into this one, I mean, that's a huge storyline we'll have to talk about. You guys are going to be down both your starting left tackle or your starting tackles. And so that's going to be something, in Pipkins, if I remember correctly, Pipkins was starting elsewhere and is going to be moved to maybe a tackle position. So you're going to be short at that position too. So, I mean, you're really adjusting your offensive line there. But the other thing that really sticks out to me, and this really kind of plays in, I don't know that I would go with it with a huge storyline, but it's big. And especially because of who they're playing this week with the Chargers.
Yeah.
They've been really good against the run so far this year. And that is not something I expected to be able to say, because that is something that Kansas City struggled against or struggled with in several seasons over the past couple of years. And you go back and you look at what they held, Derrick Henry to, and you look back at what they did to Bijan Robinson last week, which was less than 2 yards a carry.
Wow.
If they do that against the Chargers, this is not going to, I don't know that this is going to be a great game for the Chargers.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, the Chargers want to run the ball, and we'll get into that when we talk about the biggest storylines on offense and defense for the Chargers. And, we're going to get into that, and we'll do that right after this. But first, I got to tell you guys about Game Time. You can get your tickets for games and know you are getting them at the best price. Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Also, check out all-in pricing. Toggling this feature shows you the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. You also get the Game Time guarantee, meaning if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. What time is it? Game time. All right, we're back here on this crossover episode here talking Chargers and Chiefs. I am Locked On Chargers host David Drogemeyer, joined with Chris Clark of the Locked On Chiefs podcast. And we're going to get into some of the biggest storylines here on the offensive side for the Chargers starting out. And I think that this one's pretty easy. It's Justin Herbert is actually sounding like he's going to play in this football game, which after you saw what happened in the Steelers game where they lost Rashawn Slater, who had a pectoral strain, and immediately after that, basically, Justin Herbert got collapsed on, and that basically took him out of the football game. And not only did that happen, but his right tackle, the rookie phenom, Joe Alt, he also left the game on the last play of the game, and it turns out that he has a sprained MCL. So both of the top 2 tackles for the Chargers, their left and right tackles, will not be playing in this football game against the Chiefs. I said it before we started recording, playing against the Chiefs at 100% strength is a tall task, very difficult. When you're not anywhere close to 100%, including your quarterback, and you don't have the best potential protection available, it is a very, very scary situation going up against the 2-time defending world champions. So how is Justin Herbert going to be able to play? Like, that's the storyline for me. The Chargers, obviously their chances, they change dramatically when Justin Herbert is on the field. You know, he is an elite quarterback, and even against the Steelers, at one point he had went 9 for 9, completed 9 straight passes, and was looking very, very sharp, albeit on, you know, probably 2 and 3 step drops, trying to get the ball out quickly, some rhythm throws to try to mitigate some of the pass rush. But for me personally, you know, going up against the Chiefs here and having the bye week, you know, right around the corner, I don't know if this is such a smart decision for the Chargers to play Justin Herbert. And I completely understand. Justin Herbert is an absolute warrior. He's played through some crazy injuries, and almost pretty much every year of his NFL career. And so for me, there's 13 games after this bye week, Chris, and that's a lot of season left. That there's still a lot to be determined. I would prefer him and the rest of his offensive line to get healthy and get right and get ready for the stretch run. But Justin Herbert wants to play, and by the sounds of it, he probably will.
And I think that's a stupid move. I'll just be honest. I mean, I think it's a dumb move. And, you know, I said this on X earlier, and I'll say it here. For me, I look at this as, you know, if Patrick Mahomes was in this situation and he didn't have Wanye Morris or Kingsley Suamataia or Jawan Taylor, Andy Reid's not playing him. I don't care if Mahomes wants to play.
Yeah.
You have a bye week next week. There's no reason to have him play this week. Yes, it puts you in a bad situation because you can go to 2-2 a little bit easier than maybe you would if Herbert plays. And I get that. But what happens if he goes in and knocks him out for 5 weeks?
Yeah.
Because you do something even worse. And I want to be clear. I watched the game against the Steelers. Cam Hayward didn't hit it. Like, it wasn't a direct hit on his leg that re-injured it. It was, you know, that's going to happen if you're playing quarterback in the NFL. You're going to get hit. You're going to be taken to the ground. Players are going to fall on top of you. And that's basically what happened to Herbert.
Yeah.
The chances of that happening again in this Chiefs game, especially considering you're down your top 2 tackles and you're moving another guy in Pipkins, and forgive me, is he your left guard or right guard normally?
He's a right guard normally.
Okay, so your right guard, your right tackle, and your left tackle are all going to basically be out in this game. Pipkins is going to play left tackle, will be my guess if he does play.
Right.
He was out with an injury. So you're going into this with 3 guys that aren't going to be normally playing their normal positions, and you're going to put your starting quarterback that you just paid a ton of money to. I wouldn't do it. I don't see the benefit. I mean, yeah, you fall to 2-2. That puts you 2 games basically behind the Chiefs, but you get another game against them later in the season, and the Chiefs have a tough schedule. I don't see the benefit here to risk Herbert's health. I understand he wants to play, and I understand why he wants to play. But man, I just cannot see redoing it. Now, let's go back for a second. Mahomes did it in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But that's a one and done type thing.
Right.
There is no next week.
No tomorrow. Yeah.
Right. This is a completely different situation, and you have a bye week next week. And I think it'd be even a little bit different if you didn't have a bye week next week.
Oh, it would
be. The fact that you have a bye week, you could let him sit for 2 weeks and probably have him fully healthy for the next game. And I don't know who they play after the bye, but I just don't understand the move.
No, yeah, I understand it. Like I said, I understand from your perspective, and it, you know, this is a very controversial thing because, like you said, if Justin Herbert gets fallen on and something more serious happens and takes him out for a longer period of time, like, it's over. Like, we saw it last year.
He's not winning your division. The division. Sorry,
he's might not win a game. Like, that's why the Chargers went out and traded for Taylor Heineke, because Taylor Heineke actually has some starting experience and has some ability to at least try to keep the offense afloat. But the other storyline offensively, very quickly before we transition to defenses, the Chargers got to run the ball a lot better than they did last week against the Pittsburgh Steelers. Like, that is not going to be enough, especially when you're less than 100% with your quarterback and his protection. You got to establish the line of scrimmage. J.K. Dobbins was not very productive last week, and they only gave 3 carries to Gus Edwards. That's got to change. They have to make sure and eat up some yardage on the ground to be able to stay ahead of the sticks and to be able to give some manageable down and distances for Justin Herbert if he is going to be the one out there throwing the football. Now, moving over to the defensive side here, this is Jesse Minter's first opportunity to go up against the mastermind that is Andy Reid, and obviously his maestro, which is Patrick Mahomes. So, if you're running the Chargers defense, you're always going to be judged by how well you do against the Chiefs. Like, they're the measuring stick, right? And so, this is the first opportunity to see what Jesse Minter is going to be able to scheme up and game plan. The one thing we know we won't be able to see, unfortunately, is Derwin James suplexing Travis Kelce. That's not going to happen this week because Derwin James is suspended, unfortunately. And, of course, Joey Bosa is dealing with a hip injury, and I think he will miss this football game. So they're going to have to get really creative, with how they use their stars. What's the game plan going to be for Travis Kelce? And can the offense stay on the field long enough to give him a chance to be able to scheme up against this Chiefs defense? This Chiefs offense.
It's going to be a great question, and I'm really going to be curious when you lose Joey Bosa. And really quick, I saw Mac didn't practice, and it was rest. I get that, but did he miss any time in the last game? I couldn't remember.
Absolutely not. This is load management for Mac. This is an every single week thing.
Yeah.
If you looked back even last year, the first practice of the week, it was NIR rest, not injury related rest. This is another one of those situations. It's just, hey, he's 33, 34 years old. We're just trying to make sure to keep him healthy. Mac is 100% fine.
Yeah, and that's what I couldn't remember. I knew that he got rest every week in the past couple years that he's been in Los Angeles. What I couldn't remember is if he actually went out in the game against the Steelers. I thought maybe he got injured, but I'm glad to hear that he didn't. Injuries suck, especially this time of year when you're talking about a division game that everybody wants to have a good game. I mean, that's what you want. I mean, Kansas City doesn't have the injuries that the Chargers are dealing with, but they're missing Hollywood Brown. They're missing Isaiah Pacheco. Those are 2 big pieces on their offense. Would love to have them in this game. When you look at the defensive side, it's a question of how do you stop Rashee Rice right now?
Yeah.
He's got 2 games over 100 yards and 12 catches last week. That's the big thing, is how do you stop Rashee Rice? And if you do that, is it going to open up something for Travis Kelce? Because I think that part of why Rashee Rice has been so open is because they've been focusing on Kelce. Are they going to start switching to try to do maybe double both? Okay, well, if you do that, beware that you do.
Yeah, you got to pick your poison, right?
Yeah. Well, but you also have Xavier Worthy, and you have to worry about the speed.
Sure.
And that's a huge deal.
It is, for sure. Rashee Rice has been eating it up the last few games. He's really been doing well, and he's been kind of the catalyst of that Chiefs offense. Outside of Patrick, obviously he's been facilitating, but yeah, Rashee Rice is getting a ton of those opportunities. I'm curious to see what the running game for the Chiefs is going to look like, but the Chargers linebackers are vastly, massively improved. With Denzel Perriman, with Deion Henley. Deion Henley is a freak of nature. He's a guy that can go out there and cover tight ends. He can cover running backs. Like, he's a former safety, and he's been tearing it up. So I think he'll get some opportunities. I think Christian Fulton has been insane the first 3 games for the Chargers at the outside corner position opposite of Asante Samuel Jr. I think that's probably going to be the matchup. And we're going to get into those matchups, some of the key matchups that probably will end up deciding this football game. And we are going to get into those matchups right after this. But first, I got to tell you guys about FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. The odds are out for the Chargers versus Chiefs on Sunday, and the line has changed, with the Chargers now being 7.5-point underdogs, which has dropped a full point from when it opened up at 8.5 with Justin Herbert and the Chargers, have a much better chance to cover. You can also bet on the over-under for this game, which is currently at 39.5 points. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet on FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. All right, guys, we're back here on this Crossover Thursday episode here. David Drogemeyer, Locked On Chargers, here with Chris Clark of the Locked On Chiefs podcast. And this Crossover Thursday episode is presented by PrizePicks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Well, we're going to get into some of the key matchups that will end up deciding this football game on Sunday. This is a storied franchise against another storied franchise, two of the original teams in the National Football League. Always going to be a slobber knocker of a contest whenever the Chargers and Chiefs play. I do feel like the Chargers play the Chiefs pretty close for the most part, and at least have in the past. So we'll see if Jim Harbaugh and Jesse Minter will be able to keep it close in this football game. But when we're talking about the key matchups in this game, Chris, what are you looking at as far as some of the games from the Chiefs' perspective, or some of the matchups from the Chiefs' perspective that might end up deciding this game?
Really quick, I just have to say I'm really surprised by the lines by FanDuel. First, the over-under is surprising. I expect more than that points-wise, and the line really surprises me too. But I wonder if they're figuring that Justin Herbert doesn't play. That makes a lot more sense if he doesn't play than if he does. When I look at this game, I go back to what we were talking about just a little bit ago. To me, it's a question of how do they guard Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce? And, is it going to be a platoon situation where you put, Asante Samuel Jr. and Christian Fulton on Rice, at different times and maybe double him? And what are you going to do with Travis Kelce? Are you going to put a linebacker on him and a safety? Because you generally can't win a one-on-one matchup with him, especially on a regular basis. So to me, that's going to be one of the biggest matchups when I look at the Chiefs offense versus the Chargers defense, especially without Derwin James. And the other big thing is, you said it earlier, without Bosa playing, that's probably going to give Mahomes at least a second longer to scan the field and try to find somebody. So that's going to help the Chiefs offense as well.
Yeah, well, so that takes me to kind of one of the big matchups for the Chargers that's going to be very important and that's what the backup edge rushers are going to be able to do in Joey Bosa's stead. The Chargers made it a point to add to their edge room in the offseason when they went out and added Bud Dupree to a room that already sported Tuli Tuipulotu, a rookie from USC last year that had a strong season, and obviously Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa dealing with a hip injury is probably going to be out, so now it's time to see what Tuli Tuipulotu and Bud Dupree are going to be able to do in his stead against this Kansas City Chiefs offensive line. I think that's going to be a very, very important matchup. And then one other matchup I'm going to throw in there as far in regards to the Chargers offensive line, and that's how the interior is going to be able to do against the savant from the defensive line from the Kansas City Chiefs. Of course, Chris Ice Cold Jones is who I am referring to. That definitely is a scary matchup. Bradley Bozeman has not done very well in pass protection so far to start the season. He's been a good run blocker. That's kind of what his calling card has always been, but the pass protection has left something to be desired from that particular field. So hopefully he has one of his best games, because he's absolutely going to need it going up against Chris Jones.
So quick question. Are they going to move Mack? Do you expect them to move Mack from side to side, or do you think that they're going to keep him going up? Because he generally plays left defensive end, right?
Yeah. Usually plays the opposite side of Joey Bosa, so he's usually rushing over the left tackle. But they have moved him around. They do like to move move Khalil Mack around because he has that power to be able to forklift an interior offensive lineman, and we've seen him literally pick up and move tackles into the quarterback. So he has that ability to move inside, move outside. I think they're going to try to figure out what matchups favor Khalil Mack the most and try to give him as many one-on-one opportunities as humanly possible.
I'm going to guess that it's not going to be in the interior generally
Probably not.
speaking, that's
Yeah.
probably not where you want to have Mac in this matchup. Creed
No.
Humphrey,
Yeah.
Trey Smith, and Joe Tooney
Yeah.
are
They're
fantastic.
phenomenal. Obviously, very jealous.
Uh, yeah, one of the best trios I think in the middle of an offensive line in the NFL. So when you look at this from my perspective, that was my big question on Mac was if they don't really move him around and he sees
Yeah.
Jawan Taylor on a regular basis, I don't think that's a great matchup for him. I'm not gonna say he couldn't win it, a couple of times, but Taylor's been playing pretty well. But they're going to be going up against probably Wanya Morris, and that's going to be something the Chiefs are going to have to probably chip and help, and that's going to be something that they got to get taken care of, and they're going to have to get figured out. So that is going to be a key matchup. When I look at the Chiefs defense, though, you mentioned Chris Jones, and I do think that's going to be a big one, especially considering you're probably moving your right guard to left tackle. So it would not shock me if Chris Jones decides to line up there a lot. But the name that I think that Chargers fans need to be watching for is Tershawn Wharton. Wharton struggled last year because he was coming back from an ACL. He tore his ACL in 2022. Came back last year, wasn't having a very effective year, but he's been fantastic getting after the passer. He's the one that caused the interception of Kirk Cousins last week, and so I do think that. The Chiefs have two guys that can really get after the passer at the defensive tackle position, which is huge because you want to put pressure on a QB, and especially when you're talking about a QB that may be having trouble to move. Herbert likes to move, but he may not be able to move near as much as normal because of his ankle if he plays. So that'll be something to watch there. The other big question when I look at this is, they've struggled with the wide receiver position to an extent, at least from what I've seen. Quentin Johnston has played well. He's played better than I expected, considering the training camp he had.
He had a pretty good training camp, I would say. He definitely
he was dropping some passes that you would think that he would catch on a regular basis. He's gotten over that, is I guess really where I'm going with that.
Sure.
At least early on in the training camp, he was dropping some passes. So maybe he's going to be able to take a big step forward, and he has size that the Chiefs don't have at the corner position unless they play Joshua Williams, who has not been playing well for the Chiefs. So I would expect that the corners are going to be McDuffie and a combination of Najee Johnson and Jalen Watson and maybe Chamari Connor, although Connor's been playing a lot of safety and they've been moving around the defense. So, matching up with the wide receivers, and I know stopping the run is going to be a big key for the Chiefs. And we kind of talked about that earlier, but holding Derrick Henry to 3.5 yards a carry and Bijan Robinson to 1.9, the Chiefs defense has figured out how to play the run. And yes, it's going to be different for the Chargers. And it's always different when you go up against a different team. But I think Spagnuolo feels like they're going to be able to stop that, at least slow it down. And they're going to have to put it on whoever the QB's shoulders is. If it's Herbert, obviously that helps a lot.
It definitely does, because Justin Herbert has the ability to carry an offense. He has shown that throughout his career, but the Chargers don't want him to have to do that. They want to be able to get the ball rolling. They want to be able to get some chunk yards in the running game. With Greg Roman as the offensive coordinator, they are not going to abandon the run. They're going to stick to it, and they're going to stick to it, and they're going to try to batter the defense with Gus Edwards, try to soften them up, and then try to open up the big holes for J.K. Dobbins to gallop through. And, we're going to see if he's able to bounce back in this game, because he just, he didn't have a strong performance against the Steelers. The Steelers have a fantastic defensive front, so it just made it very difficult for them to run the football. So I think the other matchup before we get out of here, what I'm looking forward to is Ladd McConkey against the slot corner of the Kansas City Chiefs, because Ladd McConkey has shown an ability to get open very, very quickly. He runs very, very clean routes. He gets separation, and he's got some yards after catchability because he has some really elite quickness.
Yeah, and the big question is who's going to be that slot corner. And I wish I could tell you, because the Chiefs have been moving the corners around. McDuffie's played slot corner at times, and if it's McDuffie versus McConkey, I'll take McDuffie. Sorry, I just will.
I hope that they do that, because that would be great. That would open things up for the outside if they put him in the slot. Yeah,
it definitely could. I love what McDuffie's done, so I'll be very curious to see how they decide to attack this Chargers offense and their wide receivers, because that's going to be something that's going to play into how this game goes.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting football game on Sunday. We're going to see who plays, who doesn't, and we're going to see who comes out on top. But make sure you check out the Locked On Chiefs podcast for their Friday episode to get into keys for success and to find out who they pick to win the football game. Of course, check out the Locked On Chargers podcast as well for that Friday episode where we give you our predictions, our keys for success, and our bold predictions as well. But that's going to wrap things up for this episode of the Crossover Thursday Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, and take care.